Welcome to Vintage SF. I'm Richard Rempel, and today we're going to talk about Canadian author Robert Charles Wilson's A Bridge of Years, 1991. Now, I really haven't talked about Canadian authors very much. I think it's time to just take a look at what Google thinks are Canadian authors. This list contains Canadian citizens and also those who've lived in Canada for a considerable amount of time. Now, I'm not sure what order this is in, but we start with Robert J. Sawyer, Margaret Atwood, and Tanya Huff on the top. Other names I've recognized are Julie Cerneda, Charles de Lint, Cory Doctorow, Phyllis Gottlieb, Guy Cavroquet, very famous fantasy author. Carl Schrader is somebody that I've started to collect some of his books. Emily St. John Mandel is quite a famous Canadian author, primarily living in the United States now, who wrote Station 11. Robert Charles Wilson we're going to be talking about today. Continuing on, you see people like Spider Robinson, Peter Watts, two very famous Canadian authors, William Gibson of Neuromancer fame, and A.E. Van Vogt, a Golden Age author, James Allen Gardner, Gordon R. Dixon, John Clute of the Science Fiction Encyclopedia fame, Judith Merrill, and Monica Hughes, a YA author. I've now created a Canadian authors playlist on my channel, and you'll find authors like William Gibson, A.E. Van Vogt, and Robert J. Sawyer on there. I actually went to his book launch for the Downloaded. And there we have his signature. But today, I want to talk about A Bridge of Years by Robert Charles Wilson. Robert Charles Wilson was born in the United States in California, but he grew up near Toronto, Ontario. He's lived most of his life in Canada and in 2007 became a Canadian citizen. Born in 1953, he's still with us and he's 71 years old. I have one other book by him, Spin, which won the Hugo Award for Best Novel. Just a reminder that A Bridge of Years was published in 1991. Most of the action takes place in 3 time periods in this time travel novel. There's an opening prologue in 1979. Here we see a terrifying scene with a soldier from the future. I don't want to say too much about it because it plays into what goes on later in the novel. Then we get into the story, and I would say it's approximately 1989. Engineer Tom Wilson is recovering from a divorce and alcoholism. He buys a secluded cottage in the northwest coast of the United States, a place to get away from everything, to recuperate. Tom has purchased this cottage from an old friend from high school named Doug Archer. Doug was a bit of a wild child and loved paranormal type mysteries. He asked Tom to tell him if anything weird happens at the cottage. Apparently, 10 years ago, there was someone living there who just disappeared. The cabin, though, is spotless, as it had been prepared for sale. Tom settles in, and he leaves some dirty dishes on the counter. The next morning, the dishes are spotless. In the same way, anything that is kind of left out of order is put back into order overnight. What is happening? Why is there something returning this house to its original state to make sure everything is clean? Tom tries to stay up at night to see what's going on. He falls asleep. The next morning, everything is clean again. He sets up a video camera, and at a certain time of night, the lights go out, and this video camera isn't good enough to pick up what's going on at night. Of course, friend and real estate agent Doug Archer is very interested in these goings-on as well. Here I'm going to get a bit vague because I want you to be able to enjoy this novel. By the way, definitely going to recommend it. Tom does discover what's going on, and that discovery leads to a time tunnel that goes back to 1962 New York, right across the nation. He, too, disappears into a past. So now there's 2 people who've disappeared from this cottage. We're introduced to a neighbor now, Catherine Simmons, and she and Doug Archer try to investigate what happened to Tom. Tom, meanwhile, is in 1962 New York. Here he establishes a relationship, but they also find out there's some sort of threat. Remember that future soldier from 1979 in the prologue. All these storylines come together in a thrilling manner. This is a fast-paced, page-turning novel. At 350 to 400 pages, I read it in just over a day. It was like a cross between Clifford D. Simak and Stephen King, with a dash of Joe Haldeman. It did remind me that about 15 years later, Stephen King wrote 11/22/63, but besides the time travel element, it really doesn't connect. There are numerous points in the ending which were very satisfying and sometimes surprising. I think this actually could make a great movie or short series, say on Netflix. This was an awesome introduction to Robert Charles Wilson. I really am looking forward to reading more of his work. I give A Bridge of Years 8 out of 10. A very fun read. How about you? Have you read A Bridge of Years? Tell me about some of the other Robert Charles Wilson's novels that you've read. How about other Canadian authors that you really enjoy? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep reading.